In the summer of 1991, Lou Brock did something that nobody asked him to do. He boarded a flight to Oakland, walked into the Coliseum, and waited. The record he had carried for 12 years, 938 stolen bases, a number that had defined his place in history, was about to belong to someone else. Brock knew it. He had known it for years. And still he came. Not because the cameras were there, not because anyone expected it. The question worth asking is not what happened that night. The question is why the man who lost the most was the only one who truly understood what was being won. Rickey Henderson grew up in East Oakland, California, in a neighborhood that did not produce baseball legends. His mother, Bobby, raised 7 children largely on her own after his father left when Rickey was 2 years old. The family moved often. Stability was not something the Henderson household had in large supply. What Rickey had, from the time he was old enough to run, was an instinct for the base paths that no coach had taught him and no coach could fully explain. The Oakland Athletics selected him in the 4th round of the 1,976 amateur draft. Not the 1st round, not the 2nd. The 4th, which in baseball terms means we see something, but we are not certain enough to bet heavily on it. Henderson was 17 years old. What happened in the minor leagues was not a slow build. In his first full season at Single A Modesto in 1977, Henderson stole 95 bases. The number was not a misprint. It was not a product of weak competition alone. Bobby Winkles, who managed Henderson in the minors, told the Oakland front office something that did not fit neatly into a scouting report. He said Henderson did not run the bases, he attacked them. There was a difference, Winkles insisted, between a player who was fast and a player who understood speed as a weapon. The Athletics promoted Henderson to AAA after a single season, an acceleration that was unusual even for a prospect generating attention, but the attention itself was narrow. People talked about the stolen bases. Nobody talked about the mind behind them. That omission would follow Henderson for the next 25 years. George Steinbrenner purchased Rickey Henderson from the Oakland Athletics before the 1985 season for $4 million a year, which made Henderson one of the highest-paid players in baseball. Steinbrenner was not a man who spent that kind of money without expectations, and Henderson, in his first 2 seasons in New York, met most of them. He was fast, disruptive, and dangerous at the top of the lineup. He was also, by nearly every account from inside the Yankees clubhouse, not easy. Henderson referred to himself in the 3rd person. He renegotiated his contract repeatedly. He was accused of loafing in the outfield during games he considered unimportant. Billy Martin, who had managed Henderson in Oakland and understood him as well as anyone in the sport, offered the most precise summary available. Martin said that when Rickey Henderson wanted to be, he was the best player Martin had ever managed. The problem, Martin said, was the other days. Steinbrenner traded Henderson back to Oakland before the 1989 season. The reasoning was not difficult to follow. Henderson was 30 years old, had missed time with injuries, and carried a reputation that made every front office conversation about him more complicated than it needed to be. From a management perspective, the decision had a logic that most baseball people understood. What Steinbrenner did not calculate, or chose not to, was what Oakland would do with Henderson once they had him back. Henderson won a World Series that October. The Yankees would not win another championship for 7 years. The trade was not wrong on paper. It was wrong about the only thing that ultimately counted. Lou Brock set the single-season stolen base record in 1974 with 118. He set the all-time career record in 1977 with his 893rd steal, surpassing Ty Cobb. He held that number for 12 years, and during that time he watched Rickey Henderson come up through the Oakland system and understood, earlier than most, that the record's days were finite. In August of 1982, when Henderson was closing in on the single-season record, Brock flew to Oakland. He did not wait to be invited. He sat in the stands and watched Henderson steal base number 119, breaking Brock's own mark of 118. After the game, Brock walked onto the field. He shook Henderson's hand and told reporters that the record had gone to the right man. What made that statement more than courtesy was what Brock said next, and how he said it. He told the press that Henderson reminded him of himself not in style, because their techniques were different, but in something harder to define. Brock had spent his own career being reduced to a single attribute, fast. Brock was fast. as if the rest of what he did on a baseball field was incidental. Henderson was receiving the same treatment, and Brock recognized it the way a person recognizes a condition they have already lived through. When Henderson's all-time record came within reach in 1991, Brock was in Oakland again. He had confirmed his attendance weeks in advance. If the moment was going to happen, he intended to be present for it. Did you ever watch a player and sense before anyone else did that something different was happening? Tell us in the comments. On the night in August 1982, when Henderson broke the single-season stolen base record, he did something that became one of the most replayed and most misread moments in his career. He reached down, picked up the base, held it above his head in front of 30,000 people at Oakland Coliseum, and spoke into the microphone. He said that Lou Brock had been a great base stealer, but that on that day, Rickey Henderson was the greatest of all time. The word used most often in the press coverage that followed was arrogant. Columnists wrote about ego. Radio hosts debated whether a player should speak that way about himself on a baseball field. The conversation that consumed the next several days was not about what Henderson had just accomplished. It was about how he had chosen to acknowledge it. Lou Brock was standing on the field when Henderson said it. He laughed. Not a polite laugh, not the kind a man produces when a camera is pointed at him and he needs to appear gracious, a real one. His shoulders moved. He brought his hands together and clapped, and the clap was not ceremonial. Brock told reporters afterward that Henderson had said exactly what he should have said. He had earned the record. The performance called for the statement. What the press read as vanity, Brock read as accuracy. There is a difference between a man who overstates his case and a man who states his case precisely. Brock, who had spent his own career being reduced to a single adjective, understood which one Henderson was. The second moment came 16 years later and received almost no national attention at the time. In 1998, Henderson was 39 years old and had returned to Oakland for the fourth time in his career. The questions being asked in press boxes around the American League were no longer about whether Henderson was great, they were about whether he was finished. Scouts filed reports, front offices held conversations. The general drift of opinion was that a 39-year-old outfielder, however decorated, was a roster spot better spent on someone younger. Manager Art Howe was asked directly by a reporter before the season whether Henderson still had enough left to contribute. Howe did not consult notes, he did not hedge. He said that Rickey Henderson at 50% was better than most players at 100. The reporters in the room wrote it down. Most of them treated it as a manager's obligatory loyalty to a veteran player. What happened that season was not obligatory. Henderson stole 66 bases. He scored 101 runs. He posted an on-base percentage of 376, which for a 39-year-old leadoff hitter in the late stages of a career is not a number that requires apology. No player in the history of Major League Baseball has produced a stolen base and runs scored combination at that age, not before Henderson, not since. The two moments are separated by 16 years, but they belong together. In 1982, Henderson told the world what he was, and the world argued about his tone. In 1998, he showed the world what he still was, and the world was too busy looking at younger players to pay attention. Both times, the evidence was in plain sight. Both times, most people chose to look somewhere else. Lou Brock did not look somewhere else. He had stopped doing that a long time ago. The number most associated with Rickey Henderson is 1,406. That is his career stolen base total, a figure that has stood since he retired and shows no sign of being approached. Lou Brock, in second place with 938, is separated from Henderson by a margin larger than the gap between Brock and the player in 10th place on the all-time list. The distance is not close. It is not a record that the next generation of fast players is quietly threatening. It stands the way very few records in professional sports stand, not as a ceiling waiting to be raised, but as a number that reorients how the category is understood. The second number is 2,295. That is the runs scored total Henderson accumulated over 25 seasons, the highest in the history of Major League Baseball. Ty Cobb, who held the record for 73 years, finished with 2,245. The player who spent his career being called selfish, accused of playing for himself rather than the team, scored more runs, meaning he crossed home plate for his team more times than anyone who has ever played the game. The third number requires context to land properly. In 1990, at the age of 31, Henderson won the American League Most Valuable Player award. His on-base percentage that season was .439. His slugging percentage was .577. He stole 65 bases. Oakland won the World Series. Tony La Russa, who managed Henderson during those years, said after Henderson's career ended that he had changed the way the entire sport thought about the top of a batting order. Everything that leadoff hitters are evaluated on today, La Russa said, Rickey Henderson did first. Which of these numbers surprises you most? Leave it in the comments. In 2003, Rickey Henderson was 44 years old and still playing baseball. Not in the major leagues. The major leagues had stopped calling. Henderson was playing for the Newark Bears in an independent league in New Jersey, hitting .301 with 8 stolen bases, waiting for a phone call from an organization that never came. He was not playing for money. He had earned enough across 25 seasons to be financially comfortable. He was playing because he believed, with the kind of certainty that had defined his entire career, that he could still contribute at the major league level. He made calls. He told people he was available. The organizations that received those calls did not act on them. 6 years later, in 2009, the Baseball Writers Association of America voted Henderson into the Hall of Fame. He received votes on 94.8% of the ballots, cast one of the highest percentages in the history of the vote. The writers who cast those ballots were, in many cases, the same writers who had spent 2 decades documenting his difficult personality, his contract disputes, his third-person self-references. The record stood at 1,406. The Hall of Fame plaque was coming, and the man being honored had spent the years just before that honor playing independent league baseball in New Jersey because no one in the major leagues believed there was room for him. History and the present tense disagreed about Rickey Henderson for a very long time. Lou Brock flew to Oakland in 1991 not to surrender a record. He flew there because he had been watching Rickey Henderson for nearly a decade and had arrived at a conclusion that the rest of the sport was still working toward. The record was not being taken from him. It was being placed where it had always been going. The argument against Henderson was never really about stolen bases. It was about how a man presented himself in a world that preferred its greatness quiet and accommodating. Henderson was neither. He knew what he was. He said so, loudly, in words that made people uncomfortable. And then he went out and played 25 seasons that turned out to be a precise and extended proof of everything he had claimed. The phone stopped ringing before he was ready to stop playing. History caught up later, in a building in Cooperstown, with a plaque and a percentage that said what the phone calls had not. Some players wait for the world to recognize them. Henderson did not wait. He told the world first. The world took its time agreeing. The record stands. The phone never rang. History and reality disagreed about Rickey Henderson, and history won. If this story stayed with you, leave a like. It helps us keep telling the stories that most baseball coverage never slows down enough to tell. Drop a comment with the name of the player you believe history has not fully valued yet. Share this with someone who grew up watching Rickey Henderson play. And if you want to see the story of the man who redefined what a closer could be before anyone had a name for it, that video is coming next.